Welcome back to the John List podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am your host. All right, so in the previous episode, I talked about what happened on November 10th, 1971. So we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to December 7th, 1971, almost a month after John List murdered his family. Now, just in case you missed the previous episodes, please check it out. But I did mention about how John wrote letters to the kids' schools and mentioned to a few of the neighbors that the family, according to John, would be going out of town for a few weeks to care for Helen's sick mother, who is John's wife, right there. Okay, so John played music through the intercoms in the mansion and also turned on all the lights in the house to try to scare away intruders. But then, as the weeks were going by and they didn't hear anything from the List family, even though they weren't very social, they also noticed that the lights started going out one by one. And so they were starting to get a little suspicious. Now, John's only daughter, Patricia, right here, she was also in the drama club. And according to her drama teacher, she was the kind of person where even if she was away, she would send a postcard or send a letter or something just to let everyone know how she was doing and how things were going. But no one heard from her, of course. And that's when they knew that something was wrong. Now, there were a few kids at the high school who were thinking about breaking into the List mansion, but the teacher told them not to. He decided to go there himself, and he decided to drive up to the house and try to make a lot of noise to try to make the neighbors call the cops. So the teacher stated his concern and things like that, and so they decided to enter the house because even though the neighbors knew that according to John again, that the family was going away on a trip, they didn't know if John's mother, Alma List, went with them. So they were very concerned about her well-being. They tried to ring the doorbell. No answer, of course. And so they decided to enter through an unlocked window. Now, I know what you're thinking, and I cannot believe I didn't think about this when I first heard about this case, because the problem is you're not really supposed to be, and police officers are not allowed to really do that without a search warrant, and they did not have it for this situation. So, and that actually is brought up in John's trial, but like I said, I'm getting way ahead of myself. But I just wanted to point that out, because even I'm thinking, man, how come I didn't catch that right away? Okay, so when they entered the house, there was only basically one light in the house that was still working. And remember, this is a 19-room mansion. So it was a very big house, and there wasn't really enough light for them to get around. Now, before I continue, I do want to mention one thing, but I'm not sure if this is true or not, but there was a rumor going around that the drama teacher actually went into the List mansion on December 5th, I believe, and he actually discovered the bodies. Yeah. But then he was afraid that he would be charged with breaking and entering. So how the cops were able to do it without getting into trouble, well, I mean, some good came out of it, obviously, but still. Now, we don't know if the drama teacher actually did that or not. That's just a rumor that I heard, so I'm going to try to see if I can find more information about it. But unfortunately, the drama teacher has passed away, so I don't know if we'll ever know if that actually happened or not. Okay, so anyway, as the officers were going through the house, they had their flashlights, and they were passing through the butler's pantry into the kitchen, and that's when they noticed bloodstains on the floor. And then they were also talking about how creepy the music was. I mean, it was on a religious station, but they described it as if you walked into a funeral parlor. And even though the music is peaceful, it still really gives a bad vibe. It really makes this whole case feel like a horror film, but in real life. So, they were following the blood trail, then they were heading towards the ballroom. There were great big drapes over the archway, and then they pulled the drapes to the sides, put their flashlights into the room where there was no light, and then they discovered the 4 bodies of Helen, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. And one of the detectives talked about how he said that he called out many times saying, "This is the Westfield police, would you mind getting up?" And nobody responded. And I remember I saw a comment from someone who said, "Why would you say, would you mind getting up?" Well, I mean, and here's the thing, like, I can understand where that person was coming from, because they did mention that they smelled decomposing flesh in the house. So even though it kind of was a stupid question, I mean, I feel like police officers have to do that. But yeah, I agree that it was kind of stupid in a way. And all of them were shot in the head. And then, of course, poor John Jr., he was shot 10 times, according to his autopsy. And then they immediately called for backup. Like, they were just, like, they were just beyond horrified, because they said that they've never experienced a crime like that in Westfield, New Jersey, ever. And so they wondered where John and his mother were. So the 2 officers split up to search for them. And it's a 3-floor mansion, just so you know. So I heard that it took them 45 minutes to check the entire house. And there was one detective, actually, no, I'm sorry, I take that back, it was an officer. He said that as he was going through the house, he was actually afraid that the killer was still in the house. And he described it as, what he said was, this wasn't too long after the movie Psycho was around, and as I opened each closed door, I had the sense that somebody was going to jump out at me. And then, as backup arrived, that's when they were up to the 3rd floor, and they found John's mother's body. Then they wondered where John List was. But they didn't have to wonder why for long. And then that's when, in John's office, they found a 5-page letter that was addressed to the pastor of the church the List family attended. And I know I said I was going to have the letter read in this episode. I think I'll save that for the next one, and I do apologize about the delay for that. But in the letter, I will give you a small description. John confessed to the murder of his family. He told his pastor that he was facing bankruptcy, and he had killed his family to spare him from what he believed were the sinful effects of a life of poverty. He said, quote, "At least I'm certain now that all have gone to heaven now. Even though it's not up to John, even though he seemed to think it was." And then to make it worse, he actually ended the letter with a very chilling detail. He wrote, "P.S. Mother is in the hallway in the attic, 3rd floor. She was too heavy to move." Yeah. So the pastor was called to the house that night. They opened up the letters John wrote. The pastor had to contact members of the family to let them know about what happened. And yeah, the authorities, they had John's fingerprints because he tried to get a gun permit, even though he never picked it up. And yeah, they actually found John's car at the airport 2 days later on December 11th. And there was a parking stamp on the car, inside the car that was November 10th, but there wasn't any evidence that List took a flight. And I think he did that on purpose to try to fool the authorities, to try to make them think that he fled the country. But actually what happened was he left his car at the airport and took a train and went for the, let's see, he went to, I think it was Denver, Colorado, I think. Yeah, I think it was somewhere around there. And so, yeah, I think that's a good place to end for this episode. You know, it's like, this case is so emotional, and believe me, we're just getting started. All right, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, and I will see you soon.